All right, so I wanted to get into some of my 3D projects, maybe show you a little bit about them and like why and how much fun it is to make this stuff. So this little setup's for a swivel mount. I've got the video right here. I just gave away part of it to my buddy, otherwise I'd show you, but it was a piece of aluminum hollow tubing that was, you know, roughly this long. Had the GoPro out here to where I could barely reach it. And toggle, you know, because I do have the remote control. The remote control is pretty handy, so I do recommend that. But I did have it to where I could reach it, kind of move it up and down and play with it. I'd mounted this twice. The first time it was forward a little bit more. I've got some off-road footage of that single track here. When it tracks from behind, it was pointed too far down, so I'm like, okay, I'll just move it back on the helmet a bit. So anyway, this was the latest one from the dunes when I rolled with it. Works really good. You'd think, oh, it doesn't spin very good, but you don't need this to spin super freely, like a skateboard bearing, you know. Doesn't need to go because there's so much weight on that. With the GoPro out here, we've got this little counterweight back here that goes on it to help counter the camera, because with all that weight out here, it's kind of like you're fighting it. But if you counterweight it, and this was handy because I could put a Gopro screw in it and adjust the weight in case I wanted to go forward, backwards, and play with some things. But if you counterweight it, it doesn't really feel like there's a lot of weight on your head and you're not fighting it. So counterweight is super important. I've got these custom weights that I make for my GoPro mount that I just made this to like fit. Decided how many I would need to counterbalance the GoPro on the other side. So, you know, not all the specifics to like share here other than to point out the basics, I guess. I am gonna get this ready and get me another bar, and I could cover that again in a different video if somebody wants to see it. But for this one, wanted to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of it, right? So I try and stick with off-the-shelf stuff so that it's super easy. So obviously GoPro screws, I cut them back so that they could be longer, because you're looking for a couple things. What I was looking for is strength, as low profile as possible, but enough strength and enough room for like 2 bearings in there, because my hope was that side to side 2 bearings stacked versus just 1 bearing would give me more stability in the actual mount itself, as far as that much weight rocking around out there. I didn't do a lot of jumping with it on. Pretty sure it would have survived just fine. But I'll show you the 3D files here in a little bit. The basics here, pretty simple. See, I've got some screws. These are skateboard screws. They match up with the threads from GoPros, so that was all easy. Squeezy, got skateboard bearings in there. A little bit of a taper, so as they squish down in there, the bearings are really tight, really nice and snug. But you could pop them out and replace them if you needed. And then I bought some little washers. And when I buy stuff, I buy like a lot, because I generally will come back and revisit things, so it's worth the purchase. But you find a washer that gives you the basic size you want, which is that I wanted it to do like normal skateboard bearings do, which is there's a little washer there that metal hits to rotate against. But I wanted enough support in the mount, like this one here, you see it's on top. This one actually I made it a little bit different, so this would be a perfect fit for the washer on the new printout. But I wanted it to support the bearing and let it spin freely without it pinching the plastic or really crimping the plastic down. So anyway, it's kind of that 3-part deal. Got the base, and then the base of the upper, and then what's called the cap. and you lose a little bit of the inside so that it'll make a nice pinch on the piece of aluminum. I rubber coated it just so it help grab it a little bit more. Show you this little guy. So I do a lot of things. Well, I do all my 3D design here. What's funny is I'm used to Autodesk and Fusion, and I'm familiar enough with doing things in here that I actually loaded a VMware so that I can, you notice here I'm in a Windows 7 version, so I can run this older application. And it keeps me programming and doing things I like to do the way I like to do them, because I can build this stuff really quick. I know where everything's at, point and click, I can get to it and do the work. So this is the base. Basically, I made it for that nut to go in the bottom there. And then that way it would, you know, you'd screw into it this way. So that's actually reverted this way because that little flange helps it stick in the plastic. Because again, everything about the plastic's cool, but it's layers and it's kind of weak. And so you want to find ways to make that weakness as supported as possible. So anyway, I built that guy, did the flange the opposite way so that it would kind of pull and give more material for it to bump against. Created it as low profile as possible, but to give it, you know, some good threads. So the washer fits perfect right there now. Then this guy, I wanted 2 washers. Well, not 2 washers, 2 bearings. And so I separated them in there with that little spacer. And then there's an actual washer that sits between the 2 right there. And that's to help it support so it doesn't pull off the helmet, right? So if it's on there and you just had a washer and it was, or the bearing and it was straight down through, that thing could pull right off the bearing. And so I didn't want to glue the bearing, so I have it sitting out here, and this inside ridge right there helps hold it down. So again, you always want to think about what direction you want to print this stuff. Because if your layers are this way, you're a lot stronger in this application because the screw's going this way. If I had it and I printed it this direction, it would be weaker because it could split right there on one of the seams, right? So you don't want to do seams on things that are structural, because that aluminum pole would be going through here and it could potentially just split that thing in half. So you always print it in a direction where all the layers are strong and it supports it, makes it work. So, and you also try and think about, like, anytime you do something higher or lower, sometimes it gives more structure versus this being completely flat, because you'll have a couple more areas where it builds up a lot of the shells right there around that. And instead of, because you never print this stuff solid, so it's nice to have these little areas where you do extra printing where it is solid, and then all this other stuff has buildup. But, you know, putting this inserted in gives it a little more structure, a little more strength in those areas. And so that's why I kind of dropped that down in the final design. And so anyway, they print up good. I've been doing it on the old MakerBot with carbon fiber. Super tough. They work really great out there in the wild. Like I say, I've linked to some of the videos, showed you some of that. This is all fun and games, stuff you can do at home. You know, ping me with any questions. Let me know what you're thinking or what you like to do as far as tips and tricks that help you design things. Because actually, like when I designed this, I actually made this. It used to be one whole part, and I cut a hole through it, and then I gave a little gap so I knew that it would collapse, and then I just actually separate them into 2 different files by, you know, deleting the bottom half and saving the top, and then, you know, doing the opposite. So then, but it usually starts with one file where I build everything out and all the holes line up, and there's no question in the end of did I do everything right, because it was built as one part with the cutouts to give this the piece fitting that I needed. And then I, you know, separate them into 2 different ones so that I can manipulate them if I need to manipulate them, plus print them in separate pieces, because if I printed them as one part, then it's going to do some build-up material and it makes stuff not as clean as this when there's like no seams and it's all nice and smooth. So I don't like build-up material. So I split the file out. So anyway, let me know questions, comments, more to come. I thought doing this type of stuff would be a lot more enjoyable. Kind of show you the nuts and bolts of things and how I make some of the stuff I make. Anyway, subscribe, follow. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks from Zen Times 10 for watching. If you like that video, make sure you subscribe. We have future promos and contests coming up. Click that like button and drop us a comment on the way out.